Good morning and welcome. In Homer's Odyssey, Mentor, Odysseus' trusted older friend, was also an advisor to Odysseus' son, Telemachus, especially after Odysseus left for the Trojan War. Mentor often appeared to Telemachus disguised as the wise Athena. The name Mentor appears to be an ancient noun of mentos, meaning intent, purpose, spirit, or passion, and derives from the Sanskrit mantar, for one who thinks, and the Latin monitor, for one who admonishes. Mentor has been adopted in English as a term meaning someone who imparts wisdom to and shares knowledge with a less experienced colleague. Wendell Garrett was a mentor to each of us. We, his less experienced colleagues, met each January in this veterans room with Wendell, who was honorary chairman of the Winter Antique Shows Vetting Committee for 2 decades. Presiding over a 150-member committee of curators, dealers, and other experts, Wendell's presence bestowed the appropriate gravitas for the vetting process, while his wit, readings, and ever-welcome history lesson elevated the annual vetting committee luncheon hosted by the magazine Antiques. Today we gather, again hosted by the magazine Antiques, to honor Wendell Garrett's life and work, a gift to us all. We thank each of you who have come here today to create a memorial for Wendell, and thank Maury, Ellie, Carrie, Jay, Leslie, and Robert, and especially the magazine Antiques editor, Betsy Pagoda. Betsy and I discussed whether today should be called a memorial or a tribute. It's actually a tribute in the New York Times, but don't believe everything you read. A memoriale is a record or memory, and often a statue or a monument. A tribute, from the Latin tributum, is wealth, given as a sign of respect. Today, we have both. The memories we will now share, and the wealth, Wendell's patrimony, and our inheritance. For their help in organizing for today, I would like to thank our graduate student interns and senior show staff, all of whom are either in or have graduated from the American Fine and Decorative Arts program at Sotheby's Institute, where Wendell taught. These young scholars did not have an opportunity to learn directly from Wendell, because they're current students, yet they will inherit his wealth through his writings and through us, his friends and colleagues. After the last trumpet sound in this morning's memorial, please join us at the center of the show floor, where the magazine Antiques will host a toast and a true tribute to our friend and mentor, Wendell Garrett. Thank you.
We are here today to celebrate the life of Wendell Garrett, a remarkable and much beloved American, an American who forged a unique place for himself in our world of art and letters. For 46 of his 83 years, he was a recognizable fixture in New York City, a figure on the streets of New York, and a friend to us all. And in the last decade or so, he became nationally known through his involvement with the Antique Roadshow on national television. Well, in preparation for today, I thought I should go to Google and find out what they say about Wendell. And the most promising of the prompts was, quote, "How old is Wendell Garrett from Antique Roadshow?" And then the box said, "Best answer," and I clicked it. 98 years old, he was born March 23rd, 1913 in Biloxi, Mississippi. Related answer, I clicked it. How old is an antique? Answer, an item 2 generations old is also classed antique. Sadly, there are no absolute definitive answers. End of quote. What What would our friend Wendell have said to this example of public knowledge? He would have been appalled by the ignorance and the illiteracy, but I think he would have been highly amused by the present state of the human comedy. Now, Wendell once described the events that led to his moving from LA to NYC via Wilmington and Cambridge, and also about his move from the world of the academy to that of art and commerce as a series of deflections. 1954, a BA in American History from UCLA. 1957, an MA in American Material Culture at Winterthur. 1960, another MA in American History at Harvard. 6 years as an editor in the Adams papers. Then the watershed year of 1966, when Alice Winchester, the venerable, wonderful editor of the magazine Antiques, persuaded Wendell Garrett to move to New York City to work for her as the managing editor, then the editor, and from 1975 to 1990, he was the editor and publisher of the magazine Antiques. 24 years with that venerable institution. In the 1990s, we are here today to celebrate the life of Wendell Garrett, a remarkable and much beloved American, an American who forged a unique place for himself in our world of art and letters. For 46 of his 83 years, he was a recognizable fixture in New York City, a figure on the streets of New York, and a friend to us all. And in the last decade or so, he became nationally known through his involvement with the Antique Roadshow on national television. Well, in preparation for today, I thought I should go to Google and find out what they say about Wendell. And the most promising of the prompts was, quote, "How old is Wendell Garrett from Antique Roadshow?" And then the box said, "Best answer," and I clicked it. 98 years old, he was born March 23rd, 1913 in Biloxi, Mississippi. Related answer, I clicked it. How old is an antique? Answer, an item 2 generations old is also classed antique. Sadly, there are no absolute definitive answers. End of quote. What would our friend Wendell have said to this example of public knowledge? He would have been appalled by the ignorance and the illiteracy, but I think he would have been highly amused by the present state of the human comedy. Now, Wendell once described the events that led to his moving from LA to NYC via Wilmington and Cambridge, and also about his move from the world of the academy to that of art and commerce as a series of deflections. 1954, a BA in American History from UCLA. 1957, an MA in American Material Culture at Winterthur. 1960, another MA in American History at Harvard. 6 years as an editor in the Adams papers. Then the watershed year of 1966, when Alice Winchester, the venerable, wonderful editor of the magazine Antiques, persuaded Wendell Garrett to move to New York City to work for her as the managing editor, then the editor, and from 1975 to 1990, he was the editor and publisher of the magazine Antiques. 24 years with that venerable institution. In the 1990s, he moved to Sotheby's, where he was the senior vice president in the Department of American Decorative Arts and the director of museum services, where he worked for a number of years. Well, what did Wendell achieve in these various roles here in New York City? He moved to Sotheby's, where he was the senior vice president in the Department of American Decorative Arts and the director of museum services, where he worked for a number of years. Well, what did Wendell achieve in these various roles here in New York City? General public. Wendell was a populist. He was not interested in writing just for the Academy. His focus always went back to the early Republic, about which more in a minute. 16 books and 474 editorials in the magazine Antiques. The first editorial in Antiques magazine in 39 years, not written by Wendell Garrett, was the lovely tribute by Betsy Pagoda in the most recent issue. And may I quote, "Wendell synthesized the thoughts of the founding fathers and of historians past and present into the many lessons of his editorials, lessons in which he had to admit that democracy was often its own worst enemy." Wendell was, for 15 years, a successful, what we would call a CEO, publishing the magazine Antiques, balancing the needs of the advertisers, the authors, and the owner. At Antiques, and then later at Sotheby's, he used those two institutions really as a pulpit for spreading the gospel of American history and art across the country. We will hear more of that later today. Graham Hood called him the purest proselytizer for American art. All told, I think Wendell inspired two generations of us to our study and involvement with American history and American art. Now, how did Wendell achieve this? Why was he such an important, influential person? He had a way with people, people of all stripes. He treated everybody equally, and when he talked to you, or you talked to him, he listened. Everybody at Downton Abbey, from Lord Grantham to Mr. Carson to Daisy, would have loved him. Most of us in this room today can clearly remember the moment they first met Wendell Garrett and how he affected their lives. For me, as it happens, I did the math last night, it was January 1963, precisely 50 years ago, that I first met Wendell. I had dinner as a winter tour student in the house that he and his wife, Jane, had in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And as a hungry graduate student, I appreciated the importance of the hospitality, the good food, the drink, the books, the furniture, the architecture, and the sense of community that the Garretts provided me. Second, Wendell worked hard. He was tenacious. He was indomitable. His daughter Mariah told me she recalled as a 6-year-old in Cornish, New Hampshire, where Wendell started rebuilding a stone wall. He dislodged a nest of bees, was stung 20 times, rushed to the emergency room, and immediately came back to finish the wall. Wendell would need this kind of fortitude to deal with the debilitating physical issues he faced later in life. Thirdly, and our first three presidents were his heroes. Washington he admired, particularly, I think, his rules of civility and decent behavior, the thing he wrote as a 14-year-old, copying from some English etiquette book. Adams he knew most about because he had been an editor of his papers. And I think Jefferson he loved most because he was a man whose buildings, whose art that he collected reflected the sophisticated political philosophy of one of the great minds of the 18th century. From these men, I think Wendell recognized the importance of civil behavior and of decorum. Thus his courtly manner to all of us, thus his consideration for all of us, thus his distinctive personal style, the gold-headed canes when he first began to walk more slowly, the black fedora hat, the broad-bibbed pen with the black ink and the extraordinary calligraphy and signature. All of these helped him laugh at the fact that he wasn't as able physically to do things as he would have wanted. Wendell was devoted to his family, past and present, to Jane Garrett, to Betsy Widner, to the three children she and Wendell had, to Mariah, Abigail, Nathaniel, to their children, his grandchildren, and to Patricia Arnold, his helpmeet in recent years. Mariah again recalled for me, quote, "He used to stay up all night printing our Christmas cards. He would run the press card by card all night. The smell of his pipe and the ink rollers seeping into my sleep." Well, the last Christmas card that Wendell sent out in 2011 began with a quote from John Locke. "In the beginning, all the world was America." I'll let you figure that out, it takes a minute. But what a quote. And then it was followed by 4 pithy commandments. Be proud, be patriotic, be tolerant, be of good cheer. Has anybody else ever asked the Republican and Democrats to come together in just 10 words? We all know that Wendell loved the apt quote. His writings and speeches are full of them. His friend and printer Darrell Hyder reports Wendell saying, quote, "I like a truism, one that uses irony or paradox, has a special twist and germ of humor." Of all of the many quotes that I read that Wendell published, the one that I think would have most amused him was by Edward Young. It's a couplet. "Some, for renown, on scraps of learning dote, and think they grow immortal, as they quote." Yes, you do, Wendell.
In America, I saw more than America. I sought their image of democracy itself, with its inclinations, its character, its prejudices, and its passions, in order to learn what we have to fear or to hope from its progress. Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America.
We know how to save the Union. In giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the free honorable alike in what we give and what we preserve. We shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth. Abraham Lincoln to Congress, 1862.
We're not New Yorkers. I also, on behalf of Winter Antique Show, want to welcome you to New York. And I hope you'll have a chance to look at the show. Obviously, the splendid room. This is a very momentous time in New York's history because Friday is the 100th anniversary of Grand Central Station, and if anything symbolizes the ability to come to New York and get out quickly. It's Grand Central, but we hope you'll linger, and perhaps even long enough to also celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Woolworth Building, which happens this year, and the Armory Show. So New York is really quite extraordinary. In fact, some years ago, a man in Vermont proposed to come to New York. He made his will, had prayers offered at church, that he might be kept from peril in this wicked city. Those who live in the distance know the city only through the papers and suppose it to be as wicked as Sodom and as unsafe as Gomorrah in the time of Lot. As a home, it has few attractions to the stranger. Its solitude is distressing. In the midst of a crowd, the stranger is alone. He might live or die without anybody knowing or caring. He's jostled by the crowd, trampled down by the bus, and run over by vans. A short residence in New York changes things wonderfully. Order and harmony seem to come out of confusion. Families find themselves as well protected and as comfortable as in smaller towns. The loneliness and the solitude find compensation in the independence which each family and person secures. A man in New York can live as he pleases, dwell in a palace or in an attic, dine at night or not at all, get up early or late, live in style or be old-fashioned. In business, in the social circle, the style of man's living and doing harms him not. There is a warm, benevolent heart in New York, a frank and generous sociability. When one can command it, it's delightful. The family who wouldn't live in New York if you give them the best house after a year's residence are seldom willing to live anywhere else. That passage, written in 1868, seems to have had great resonance for Wendell Garrett, who arrived in New York from Boston nearly 100 years later, after it was written. Characteristic of Wendell's relish for the historical quotation and its modern relevance, he decided to reprint it in his own small hand press and share it with friends, old and new, even as he was becoming a determined convert to the cosmopolitan ways of the city. He embraced New York, its energy and diversity, and found a comfortable justification for his own move here from Boston. This small New Year's token thus documented Wendell's own rite of passage. By year's end, his ongoing amusement of the quaint and quotidian, I've really always wanted to use that word in a sentence, was documented by another slender leaf, the influence of mince pie on civilization. Such arcane interests were pursued in the midst of the steamy, radical 1960s. Was Wendell Garrett a man out of time and place? Boston is not New York, and the magazine Antiques was hardly the hushed and unhurried world of academic scholarship that had occupied him as a member of the Adams papers. Wendell seemed very much at home in Boston, nestled, as he and Jane were, in the comforting embrace of the Cooper Frost Austin House in Cambridge, a few doors from Harvard College, and a few centuries from modern life. That environment fitted him like a glove, and he prospered comfortably in this Yankee enclave. But wait, he wasn't a Yankee, not even a Connecticut Yankee. He was a California Yankee. That dichotomy, as with much of his life, both professional and personal, was at the core of who he was. Fearful of earning the rebuke of memorialists who talk mostly about themselves, I nonetheless need to mention that I first met Wendell nearly a half a century ago, somewhat later than Maury. In 1965, when, as a Winter Tour graduate student, when he, as a Winter Tour graduate, welcomed my Winter Tour class during our field trip to Boston. Fellow enthusiasts for a somewhat romantic and fictional image of the sheltering embrace provided by a retreat into the colonial past, we were captivated by Wendell's environment, his activities, his easy accessibility, and the apparent sense of living with history while doing it. We were thus suitably shocked a year later to hear he was uprooting and moving to New York, not for some grand historical enterprise, but to work at antiques, still something of a celebration of early American craft. Why forsake the sanctity of scholarship for work at a semi-popular magazine, we wondered. We would discover later that there was a curious edge to that institution, and Wendell was amused to recount that the owner of this bastion of American gentility was Michael Straight, a one-time communist and KGB operative. It was, however, as a magazine editor that Wendell found his true calling. For here he could move comfortably between past and present, engaging in a variety of ideas, topics, and points of view that would become a mantra for his own description and characterization of the panorama of American culture. We were originally in adjacent cubicles along with Tom Armstrong, and wondered if there was some reason we were in the antiquities department. I subsequently learned that that area was referred to at Sotheby's as Jurassic Park. I could easily see Wendell's determination to go on, to not give up, despite the difficulties of getting around to being active. There was a reflection here of that same drive that characterized those long-ago trips to Vermont, with Wendell facing unimaginable obstacles and strenuous difficulties, now confined to a motorized scooter and with diminished muscle control, making his way 30 blocks uptown and spending the whole day at his desk whenever possible. I never heard a complaint. There were no expletives deleted. So what was it about Wendell? So what was it about Wendell that we loved, cared for, and admired? I believe that it was his total sense of engagement and his ability to encourage and motivate. His identity and his activities were completely congruent, and to this he brought a positive attitude, a generous spirit, and an absolute willingness to do what needed to be done with a unique style that was both modern and out of time. He was, in many ways, a missionary for what might be overlooked, lost, or misunderstood, and needed to be rediscovered or reimagined. His larger mission was to enlighten us with intelligence and charm, and to remind us of our roots, adopted or otherwise, and to encourage the recognition that that was good. He savored life as lived as well as the life of the mind. And he reminded us that life can be, after all, well lived and a good read.
We all have our favorite issues of the magazine Antiques, and I'm particularly fond of one of the more recent ones that came out representing the 90th anniversary of the magazine, because it begins with one of Wendell's classic letters that also begins with that wit that Maury talked about. And Wendell began, according to Genesis, when Lot's wife looked back, she became a pillar of salt, discovering to her sorrow that retrospection can be fatal. Well, today we're all going to engage in just a little bit of retrospection, but hopefully not enough to deliver a fatal dose. When you turn the page of that issue, you're confronting Tom Savage's great article, The Boy Who Loved Antiques. And we all enjoyed reading that story of the young boy who grew up in the rural eastern shore of Virginia, who, when packed off and sent to boarding school as a young boy, was caught on the very first night by his dorm master, reading the magazine Antiques by flashlight, and the dorm master saying, "Do you like antiques?" And Tom answering yes, and the dorm master saying, "I do too." Well, Tom then goes on to talk about what it was like as a young student to become exhausted by chemistry and algebra and run back to that dorm room and close the door where he could hop on his own personal private jet with Wendell Garrett as his pilot to take him to see what was the newest thing going on at Colonial Williamsburg, to tour the historic collections and houses at Deerfield and Winter Tour, or to hop across the Atlantic and visit great English country houses. And that was the role that the magazine Antiques and the Wendell Garrett as its editor fulfilled for him for many of the school years, until finally, as a graduate student, he was able to meet that pilot at no other more fun location than the Natchez Antiques Forum in Natchez, Mississippi, where Wendell transformed himself into that mentor that Catherine talked about at the beginning of this memorial service. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever been to the Natchez Antiques Forum, but it is quite an event. And the planning starts well beforehand. All the mahogany furniture and all the silver has to be polished. And Jeanette Feltus's recipe for milk punch has to be mixed up and gotten into the freezer. And all the crinolines and the hoop skirts have to be dragged out of the closet and gotten in preparation for the forum. Now, for Southerners, this is a bit like training camp for the Second Coming. But the fact of the matter is that for the ladies of Natchez, what it really was about was the fact that Wendell Garrett was coming to town. And Wendell Garrett was a very big deal. And in fact, Wendell Garrett, we have to understand, was their pilot from Natchez, Mississippi to the larger world of American decorative arts. Now, many of you may not know that Wendell Garrett loved the South, and the South loved Wendell Garrett back, with personal family roots that stretched from Florida all the way into Georgia and Alabama, back to New Kent County, Virginia in the mid-17th century. Wendell Garrett was imbued with the gregarious sensibility of a Southerner, combined with the sunny optimism of a Californian, rolled into the erudition of the New Englander, and finally topped off with the cosmopolitanism of a New Yorker, in a way that was truly unique to Wendell.
Monticello by Robert Haas. Snow is falling in the age of reason on Tom Jefferson's little hill and on the age of sensibility. Jane Austen isn't walking in the park. She considers that this gray crust of a horizon will not do. She is by the fire, reading William Cooper, and Jefferson, if he isn't dead, has gone down to Kmart to browse among the gadgets, pulleys, levers, the separation of powers. I try to think of history, the mammoth jawbone in the entry hall, Napoleon in marble, Meriwether Lewis, dead at Grinder's Trace. I don't want the powers separated. One wing for Governor Randolph when he comes, the other wing for love, private places in the public wheel that ache against the teeth like ice. Outside this monument, the snow catches, star-shaped, in the vaginal leaves of old magnolias.
Man will not merely endure, he will prevail. He is immortal, not because he is alone among creatures, has an inexhaustible voice, but because he has a soul, a spirit capable of compassion and sacrifice and endurance. William Faulkner, Nobel Prize speech, 1950.
Why should I care about posterity? What's posterity ever done for me? Dr. Marks.
As life is action and passion, it is required of a man that he should share the passion and action of his time at the peril of being judged, not to have lived. Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Give us courage and gaiety and a quiet mind. Give us the strength to encounter that which is to come, that we be brave in peril, constant in tribulation, temperate in wrath, and in all changes of fortune, and down to the gates of death, loyal and loving one to another. Robert Louis Stevenson. And we'll conclude with John Donne's holy sonnet, Death Be Not Proud.
Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou thinkest thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be much pleasure, then from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee to go. Rest of their bones and soul's delivery.
Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell, and popular charms can make us sleep as well. And better than thy stroke, why swellest thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die.
Unlike the other speakers here today, and certainly unlike Wendell, I'm not really a storyteller. I'm the person who dots the I's and crosses the T's, puts in the commas, and tries very hard to make sure that everything we produce at Antiques is eloquent and beautiful and right. So I'm very grateful to everyone here who's made today's memorial all of those things. And Ellen, Carrie, Jay, Leslie, Robin, Catherine. I also thanks, as some of you have mentioned, to Gallup Tyler, who was old, very old friend and typesetting soulmate, who designed and printed the beautiful leaflets we have. And a special thanks to the always beautiful and eloquent, unusually bright Betsy Koga, whose vision for this program was very essential to making it work so well. My final thank you goes to former Sergeant Major Woodrow English, who will close this celebration of Wendell's life with his rendition of Aaron Copland's Pancake for the Common Man, one of Wendell's very favorite pieces of music. Sergeant Major English retired as senior trumpet soloist and special bugler from the United States Army Band after 34 years of service in 2010. He played taps at the 60th anniversary of the D-Day invasion at Omaha Beach, and he has performed at the burials and memorials of some of Washington's most prominent servicemen and politicians, including Ronald Reagan and Ted Kennedy. He is here today thanks to Mariah Garrett, an old friend that met him when you were just in high school, taking vocal lessons from a friend of his, who was also in the Army Band, correct? Okay. When Mariah wrote us that Sergeant Major English would like to perform today, she wrote, I truly believe and always have that when Copland wrote the fourth movement of his symphony, what became known as Fanfare for the Common Man, that he was thinking of men like that. He wrote it for men who started from